Welcome back, everybody, after lunch. I hope you had a good, hope everyone have a good lunch? Yes? We're a bit sleep. I promise we're going to keep you awake with this session. Well, we're launching now our convergence track, which is very exciting as it's about brands, storytellers, creatives coming together. It's going to start now from here, running right the way through until tomorrow. We've got some exciting lineups. And what better way to start than we're going to have a conversation discussing the power of story. And we're delighted that we have Senior Minister of State Janil, who's going to be here, where we're going to be discussing from government's role in innovation, and of course, Mr. Walt Disney Asia himself, Robert Gilby. So please join me with a big round of applause welcoming these two to the stage. Minister. Oh, it's great, it works. The hands moving. Now, thank you. We've also, as this is all about stories, talking, creativity, we're going to be opening it up to the floor also for questions. We're going to have some, so if you do have any questions, please raise your hand. There are microphones. It would be great if there was no shyness, so if we can have someone volunteer, there'll be a great prize for the first person to ask a question. So we're going to see where it comes from. Minister, this whole merger we've seen of two agencies coming together, of Infocom and media coming together, how are you seeing this from the government's role in bringing together the regulators, these two communities together?
Well, it highlights the difficulty we have in trying to keep them separate. So no point trying to keep them separate. We need to accept the fact that the production of content for one platform is going to make things available for another platform. And the challenges around regulation, talent development, business opportunities are going to be very similar. So we're trying to move away from those old structures, just as this conference is moving away from what we used to do last year. We see this as an opportunity. There is going to clearly be some rationalization and some optimization of the work, but I think there's a very significant opportunity for us to move early, take advantage of this, and really start to develop the talent pool here in Singapore that can service this, that can cross over between different types of media and different types of storytelling. So we see this as a big opportunity.
And just from that side, you mentioned obviously talent pool. What do you see from the government's role is with developing the talent pool and that stage, some of those ways of taking it that stage further?
Well, I'm very glad that you asked me about my other ministry portfolio. It's a very nice thing that you did there, because I also have a portfolio in education, and that clearly is a big part of what we do, making sure that the opportunities in the education space are getting our kids ready for the type of jobs that are available. We have a big thrust of trying to blur the lines between industry and education, and look and see how we can give more of the kids within our education space an opportunity to work in industry and bring industry practitioners into the education space. So around media convergence, digital product development, software development, these are things that Singaporeans have a great interest in already. We are seeing the interest and competitiveness for the kids joining these courses rise. And we want to make sure that as we do so, we are being industry relevant. So I think there's lots of opportunity for us as a government to provide that push in the education space, and then have a partnership with industry come along at the interface.
Very fascinating. And Robert, you're a company we all know very, very well. And when we talk about story, many of us have our favorite Disney story. How is Disney, which is really a phenomenal, powerful brand, utilizing everyone's desire for a story and also providing this for the world, really?
We start with the shift in the industry forces. I think when you think about technology, you can be scared of it, or you can embrace it and lean in. And so what we're trying to do is lean into the technology. And rather than seeing this as a disruption that removes our core business, we're seeing this as an opportunity to expand. So what used to be broadcasting, literally one-to-many broadcast, has now become one-to-one or many-to-many. And with that, we see new platforms. You can see the social platforms, Facebook and YouTube. You can see more engaged transactions through Alibaba, through Netflix, the kind of subscription services. And we've seen the roles of telcos evolve to being a key interface of that, for the consumer to be able to enjoy our stories. A couple of things change, and we just have to adapt with those. Business models evolve. So, subscriptions become more flexible. And one of the things I love, especially in this part of the world, is the mobile operators have borrowed from FMCG companies and the sachet strategy to try and create business models that appeal to consumers. So you can, in the Philippines, for example, you can buy a day pass to a service, day pass to Spotify, or you can buy a game pass for NBA. So you can actually evolve the business models on a subscription point of view, and we see the advertising industry evolving too. Programmatic has emerged, a very algorithm-driven buying process, but on the flip side of that, storytelling has creeped into advertising. We see a lot of brands saying, I don't just want to buy a spot and push my media, I want to work with storytellers so I can deepen a relationship with the consumers. So business models evolved, creative communities have evolved. So the whole YouTube system has created a number of individuals who sit in their room and create stories. Who would have thought unboxing a toy was actually a story? But if done well, it has as much viewing as many of the traditional media. So I think the nature of the creative community has evolved a little bit too.
That's fascinating. I mean, we had a brief chat last night. I think one of the key questions I want to ask you from, obviously a lot of the themes of this event is corporates and brands engaging with startups. And how does Disney, which as we all know is by nature you are the creative, entrepreneurial company, does Disney have this drive to be entrepreneurial, to keep itself, and how you've got to come up with, there's only 70 Mickey Mouse stories, new characters, new products. How do you find that as a company to try and do that?
There's never so many Mickey Mouse stories. He's 90 years old, we're not done. I think the idea is being entrepreneurial, being innovative is in our DNA. Walt Disney was an inventor. He's got patents. He created the first animated features. And we mustn't lose that DNA just because we get large. So we have pockets, little clusters of innovation around the company. But I think, given the power of story and the theme, I can think of it from two lenses. One is, as storytellers, or we create stories. What goes into creating a story? You think about the story arc. You think about where you begin the journey, where you end the journey, how you take people through the challenges, the heroes, the villains, the drama. You follow that whole story arc. What's key to that are characters. Are you emotionally connected to those characters? Are you vested in their success? Do you want to see this story through? And all of that is the starting point for a story. The rest, we're using more and more technology to enhance and to embellish and to make that story something you can relate to more. Like Jungle Book, the live-action version of Jungle Book, felt very photorealistic. You can immerse yourself in that world. That's what we do creatively. We try and find new platforms to do that. So, for example, Lucasfilm has got a facility here in Singapore where they do a lot of the Industrial Light and Magic visual effects. And Lucasfilm's looking at how do they take their techniques with rendering, with light and illumination, and apply that to the immersive experiences like VR and AR. When I think about the startup world, the importance of storytelling in your roles of launching a business, in attracting partners and investors is essential too. If you're trying to pitch for an investor, or if you're trying to pitch for a partner, think about your story arc. What is the journey you've gone on? What is the direction you're going? Who are the characters? And most importantly, what's the emotional connection? Who is your audience? So if you've got a strategic investor, what is that strategic investor looking for? What is their emotional connection to your journey? And how can you get them emotionally vested in the characters, which is you, the talent, the startups? And so we do actually think that those basic techniques can be applied across the startups.
We're talking about characters. What's your favorite Disney character?
That's very hard. I love all my children.
Which is the favourite child?
Well,
it's not like this is being filmed or streamed.
No, not like it's being streamed. I do have to say, I do like Yoda. Especially his phrase of "do or do not, there is no try."
And Minister, what about yourself?
Yeah, you have half an hour for me to explain this.
We've got time. Let's go.
Well, I would have said Yoda as well, because partly when I was teaching, I turned out to use quite a lot of his quotes to my students, which they always got very annoyed by. But I'm gonna then just take a leap and say it's Han Solo. And the reason I think is because I still do remember watching that first Star Wars movie. And it's a strange quote, because you'll have to imagine as a young boy growing up with science fiction what a rocket ship looked like. And what a spaceship looked like. And you had this beat up starship, and he said those famous words, which was, "I've made a few modifications myself." And this idea that you'd have this homemade, half-built, held together with tape starship that could see you through adventure after adventure has forever burned Han Solo in my memory. So I'm gonna say it's Han Solo as my favorite character, which wasn't. No, I won't say. Wait, well, no, never mind. Yes, and of course it's it's Han Solo in the original where he shot first. I'd just like to,
Okay.
I hope I haven't destroyed your canon.
No,
sort
it's
of,
fine.
no.
There's a young Han Solo story coming as well.
Oh, excellent.
Good. We'll agree with the backstory.
We're going to have a separate Star Wars session later.
Yes, just the two of us. You don't have to know.
You mentioned something. I want to ask something very interesting because obviously you started off, in teaching in medicine. How are you seeing that this transition of, kind of startups and entrepreneurs used to kind of be the outliers, that being a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant, and now we're seeing, testament today to the people we have coming is this. We were talking about this boom in entrepreneurship, and from the government side, how are you seeing able to foster that? Is it that, because there's a challenge, because obviously different jobs go through different phases. How are you trying to deal to make sure that obviously in 20 years' time, the workforce, there's enough of each, and trying to make sure that new roles are created?
Well, there's quite a lot to do, and that convergence, you started off with the example of medicine. And technology and startups. And today you have a situation where if you're teaching in a medical school, if you're running a medical school teaching program, you're paying quite a lot of attention to, do you have the skills to develop interactive video products, VR, software products that will do the teaching? If you're running a hospital, then the IT operations guys are just as important in making sure that your systems are live 24/7. And so that idea of a convergence and a series of careers that people could take in order to fulfill a mission is very much alive, that's out there. A couple of my ex-students are running startups, tech startups, bringing to bear their medical knowledge as well as some opportunities that they've seen in the world out there. And what can we do is get the conditions right. And getting the conditions right is not easy, and there are a number of parts to it. We have to have an education system that concentrates on making sure the fundamentals are deep. You have to leave with that sense of understanding how science works, having the critical thinking skills, the computational skills, the math skills. That fundamental has to be there. But then on the other side, you need that whole flex about reskilling and retraining and not being focused on just one particular set of skills or a particular industry dimension. You've got to have that open space where you can choose different paths, fail and try again. So that balancing between a really strong fundamental education space and a really open opportunity in the adult learning space is an important precondition that the government can set. I would suggest that another important precondition is the regulatory framework. And I think a big part of why a number of entities, hopefully like Disney as well, choose to be here is because of that whole ecosystem, whether it's the financial services, the legal services, the business-to-business processes, just to remove as much friction as possible. And a big part of what I'm doing, wearing one of my other hats, with the Smart Nation Digital Governance Group, is to look at those issues and where we can help to remove as much of that friction as possible. Taking a very proactive stance of creating the right conditions for this type of cross-fertilization, convergence, new products and new opportunities come about. And one specific example of where we really want to be very bold in this is one of the recommendations that came out of our Committee on the Future Economy, restructuring industry-wide, economy-wide, so not industry-wide, across the whole of our economy, is to take the idea of regulatory sandboxes that take the assumption that in any number of domains, media, tech, wide variety of other things, perhaps our current laws and regulations are always going to be lagging behind. Assume that it's going to be lagging behind. How do you then create those conditions when really what people want is some kind of business clarity and business certainty? We're calling this the regulatory sandbox approach, where we define a space or an idea or a concept or a geographical area and make it clear, operate within these boundaries, and we're not going to come and interfere. And what we'll do is we'll watch very closely, and then we'll use what's happened in there to inform what we do in terms of our laws or our regulation. We've done this with a physical space in One North around autonomous vehicles. We've done this with a conceptual space around our monetary authority for cashless payments. We're thinking about a data sandbox to look at how we can help companies and entities share data. But the idea that in each one of these things, we don't have a regulatory environment that is just right for the opportunities that you're creating in business. But we still want you to create, we want you to innovate, get on with it, and we'll watch it in a way that will inform our regulatory structure downstream. So I think those are the three big things that we could do as a government to make sure that this very fertile churn of bringing together disciplines and domains happen. Agile, self-sustaining, updating regulatory process, an environment that sustains adult learning and reskilling, and an education system that concentrates on making sure the fundamentals are right.
And this concept of, obviously, culturally we see in different regions, different areas of fear of failure and entrepreneurship. Is this something you think that will happen from the education system? Is it something that you'll see educated from the corporates? Because, it's the same question I'm asking to both of you. Clear for your answer, you, by nature of Disney, you probably make many different shows. You start with 20, and there's probably the finished version is probably a mix them all together. How do both of you look at the organisations which you run and deal with that? It's okay to make a mistake. This is the way around it. We've seen from the regulatory sandbox, you have that, but is this something we can instill in the education system, or it's just a change that we're going to see?
Well, I think the issues to do with being entrepreneurial and risks of failure and the cost of failure, very, very different with the public sector compared to the private sector. So, by nature, the approach has to be different. But you can't have a public sector that is completely paralyzed because of paralyzed to inaction as a result of a fear of failure. Otherwise, we would never innovate. We would never take those important steps to drive our society forward. So the important thing from a public sector point of view is how to deal with mistakes when things were done in good faith. How to deal with issues that go off on a tangent and learn from it and iterate and do it better. So that's a lot of that is about the internal public sector culture and the sort of the state approach to that. There is an expectation in our public that as a government we are bold with technology and that we are innovative with policy and the services that we deliver. A significant number of things that we do now, we're trying out new apps, new services, trying to look at partnerships with the private sector, and we accept that a significant number of those are not going to succeed. We have to be prudent with the public dollar, but there is, I think, a healthy expectation of innovation of the government from the public, and that's going to keep us on our toes, and we've got to service that.
And I think, like you said, the power of these regulatory sandboxes giving that environment is really quite unique. Certainly for this region, and it's certainly strong. And it's, I think the question to you, Robert, is also looking from the corporate side of how you're, because ultimately the stories, I'm sure some of these characters' journeys and stories have been that, how do you within your organisations, it's that, I think the best I'm looking at is keeping that energy flowing, keeping that evolution.
Well, I think it's a great example I can give, which is we bought a company called Maker Studios. So Maker was the largest network of YouTube creators and talent kind of globally. And we looked at how does that relate to the world that we have here. And I would love to be making a lot more television shows like our ABC Studios sort of team make, but they're very high financial investments, and you need to have some degree of certainty, both creatively and from a business model point of view. And so you have to make very sensible kind of decisions of how much risk you take. With our YouTube influencer network, our Maker talent, they've evolved from sitting in your room, creating a makeup show, an unboxing show, a comedy, some music videos, the various genres that they had, the games reviews, and they've evolved into true storytelling. And so how do we take them into professionally produced content? And it gives an entry point, say, for talent in Singapore, talent in Southeast Asia and Asia, to be able to access the creative world they may not have otherwise got if they hadn't moved to, say, Hollywood. And this is a great example where the IMDA and Ministry of Communications have supported an environment without saying what it needs to be. So, for example, they've created environments. Pixels is one of these innovation spaces that the government supported. There's a building in One North, and there's a game solution center. So 18, 20 game startups are trying new things. They wouldn't have a home to try new things. They wouldn't have the networking, the collaborative opportunities to bounce ideas off each other without that kind of destination. There's a YouTube creator space where if you are an individual, you can go, you can shoot your videos, you can network with other people, you can connect as a group. When I thought, where do I put my Maker Studios team? Where do I put my social media team that are creating assets for all the markets in the region? Rather than put them in my main building, the Sankrama building, alongside all the corporate teams, I said, let's put them alongside that community. So we put them in the building, and they have a lot more collaborations. The IMD also funded a thing called Make a Boot Camp. So Make a Boot Camp took 20 YouTube groups or talents, YouTube talents, and they would pitch concepts. We'd bring our maker and YouTube talent from UK, from US, from around the globe, from around the region, to sit in and we'd do a pitch process, and the winners would get some development funding and they'd get some support, and their actual concepts would be launched. That's us trying to keep the power of that very authentic, very nimble entrepreneurial creativity without letting it get absorbed by a big system which says, I don't know about these risks. Some of those concepts won't work, but some will, and we wouldn't have had a chance to do those if we hadn't have tried and experimented. And I think that's trying to keep that entrepreneurial, innovative spirit alive is kind of the key role.
Actually, we've got outside in the convergence area, we're getting these, maybe later on today, that some of the companies from the Pixel Lab and others. So when, if you fancy, I'm sure many of you have seen around the exhibition, but in the convergence zone and afterwards Tech Alley, there's some very interesting companies who've been in many of these different programs. I know we've got a few minutes left, and I know I promised there'll be a prize. Anyone have a question to ask? Please, I don't think we have. Yeah, one? Anyone? Oh, over there. Thank you. We've got a microphone coming now.
Thank you. I'm Reggie. Nice to meet you. Yeah, I think our public sector is very well taken care of. I think that's great. Yeah, but I have a question for Mr. Walt Disney. So I've studied
Walt, okay.
Yeah, so I've studied your company a little bit. So I have a few questions, 2 questions primarily. So one question is, Disney has a very high hit rate, very successful in your content creation. So how do we continue that high hit rate moving forward? What's your secret sauce, right? And then the second one, you're facing a lot of challenges from Netflix, Amazon Prime, and all these kind of subscription businesses. ESPN is getting hurt. Are we going to divest from ESPN? And what's the next move for Disney? That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. So on the hit rate, thank you very much. Anybody who works in the creative sector will be the first to say that there's never a guaranteed hit. So every time one of our creative projects, whether it's a film or a TV show, works, we're very grateful and appreciative. What has worked really well, especially for our film studio at the moment, and we try and follow across the rest of our businesses, is working with the best talent who are passionate about their projects. I gave an example in an earlier panel this morning about if you're a startup, what do we look for? I look for passion. And so if you take John Lasseter, he believes his characters are real. They're not animated characters. They are real. If you talk to Kevin Feige, who runs our Marvel Studios, he has the Marvel Universe mapped out in his office for the next 10 years. And none of us are allowed to go in his office because it's all top secret. And so these filmmakers, Kathleen Kennedy, who runs Lucasfilm and is the producer of the latest Star Wars movies, Kathleen has one of the best resumes in filmmaking of anybody. And so you work with the best talent and you try and give them the best opportunity to tell those stories, because we care about the stories first, we care about the characters, and then from that, everything else in Disney's model flows. On subscription services, it really depends how you look at it. I said at the beginning, I'm an optimist about new technologies. If you are wed to only one business model, then you can get challenges. But I think for us, we have great stories, great characters, great brands. I see new technologies as an opportunity. We partner with companies like Netflix. We partner with Amazon. We partner with the local versions of these companies. We partner directly with telcos. What we care most about is stories, characters, and brands, and how we connect those with consumers in a way that they can emotionally engage. The way we do that has to continue to evolve because consumer behavior evolves. And increasingly as a global company, we have to make it more and more locally relevant. That's why we've been growing around the globe to try and say, how do we connect those stories with the local consumers? So I'm an optimist. I believe we'll navigate most of that. And I think, in terms of opportunities, there are a lot more out there that we haven't tapped yet. So great growth potential.
Thank you. And I'm going to, if I may, ask the final question to you, Minister. If we were looking back, fast forwarding a few years, and within this media tech landscape, how do you see Singapore? What's your plans for the next years? We're sitting here having this conversation 3 years? What would you like to be seeing more of in Singapore? What would you like to be seeing where it's going? And then we're going to remember it in 3 years. We can.
You're going to hold me to that. Yeah. Well, I think on a number of dimensions, our kids coming out of school and running startups, working in collaboration with MNCs and international companies, will have a default setting that they're making their content for an international audience. That from the get-go, they are thinking of that first product, thinking of that first business model, thinking of that first collaboration as having an audience and a market that is well outside of our borders. I think that's something that if 3 years from now that's happening, that would see a very significant, serious improvement and a very positive impact on how the whole ecosystem develops. The second is that we develop very strong ties with regional partners where work is easily shared, where there's a product to be developed and some of it's done here and some of it's done somewhere else. That process becomes as seamless and friction-free that the talent coming to bear on it, as well as the commissioning entity, the company or whoever is commissioning, it is frictionless that we here in Singapore can collaborate with people around the region and perhaps around the world. I mean, it's something trite, and you kind of imagine that it happens today, but it doesn't happen without a significant amount of friction and difficulty, both from a regulatory point of view as from a logistical point of view. But if we can get to the point where we remove all that, and it happens almost by magic, dare I say Disney magic, then that would be a very useful landing point. Do I get a, yeah, no.
Yeah, that's the pixie dust. That was the pixie dust.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think those are two things that I would really like to see over the next 2 or 3 years. And I think the last point would be is if we arrive at a point 3 years from now where, as a result of the activity that you've just described, the competition that the friend in the audience described between the various OTT players, the established players, the online distributions, the non-traditional distributions, if that process has played out to the point where we can be a place where there's some clarity over a business model and an operating model that works well in this environment, then we will have arrived at a very good place. And if I can have all three, then, you know, frankly speaking, I'll be a very happy man. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a round of applause to Mr. Janil and Rob for a great opening session. Thank you. I'm going to hand over now to our MC, we've got a great lineup, and JB, please take it away.